I'm sitting with Beatrice Birch. So happy that you're here, Beatrice, and we can continue our conversation. Beatrice is the founder and director of Inner Fire, which is a very extraordinary residential care center for people who have been diagnosed with relatively serious emotional upset. So that is traditionally called a mental illness, but I think both Beatrice and I try to stay away from that particular way of naming things. So Kelly Brogan did a wonderful interview with Beatrice not long ago, and they went over what happens within the program amongst some other very important details. But Beatrice and I thought we would embroider upon that particular interview, and I had the opportunity now to ask her a few more questions that weren't covered in that interview. So, Beatrice, would you like to say anything more by way of introduction?
Well, also, I'd like to pick up on what you said just now about the mental health. I think what I'd like to stress is that personally, I do not see it as mental health. You know, our head is not disconnected from the rest of our body. And at Inner Fire, the gesture is really the soul health. And we can always go into that in more detail and perhaps will, but the human being has a body, a soul, and a spirit. And certain situations happen in life which either contracts the soul or the opposite, sort of, they soar too far out because of the pain they experience. So we're always working with this breathing on a deeper soul level. And this mental health, it's just to me a reflection of our materialism, of our, our disconnect. Yeah.
Yeah, and what some people call reductionism, really reducing us to parts as if we're a car. So if it has to do with our response to things, then it's in our head, right?
Yeah.
And if it has to do with a leg, it's in our leg only. It doesn't have to do with anything that's going on here, which may be crippling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful place to start. And actually, it does seem to me that what you're doing, and I was fortunate enough to visit your facility, what you're doing really has to do with the health of the spirit and the soul and bringing that forward so that people can live into it rather than living into the more, as you were saying, materialistic values in our culture. But one of the questions that wasn't covered in your interview with Kelly was how do you manage the religious and cultural aspect here? Because a lot of people are really triggered by anything of a religious nature and don't want to be in any place where they might, be converted or have pressure put on them to think a particular way or follow a religion or philosophy. Yeah. Do you have a religion or philosophy that you're trying to transmit to people?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And if you really think about what we're trying to do, it has all to do with the freedom of the human being, but the freedom in the higher sense. Yeah. The whole program is with the understanding that out of form comes freedom. Mm. So the medications totally cripple the individual's ability to truly be free. Now, at the same time, I want to really stress, Emma, that Inner Fire is about choice. Okay, we would never tell anybody they should come off their medications. That's not our business. But I met too many wonderful young people, very thoughtful, very sensitive, with real gifts to give, who hated being medicated and therefore took their life because they didn't realize there was a choice. Mm. And that's totally what catalyzed Inner Fire. Mm. If it weren't for meeting them, I might not have even found colleagues in order to do this important work. But so the freedom of the individual we stress. And so we have in Inner Fire, in order to be what it really needs to be, has to be available for people regardless of their financial situation, regardless of their religion, their race, that we just meet in our humanity. And so we as guides, who are the staff at Inner Fire, we come from a whole cross-section of backgrounds. Mm. And that's what makes it so rich, yeah? And we have some people who are churchgoers, others have never stepped foot in a church. We've had seekers who come from the Muslim tradition, from the Jewish tradition, from the Christian, and the different facets of the Christian religion. And that's the beauty of it. But I would say what all of us as guides at Inner Fire have in common is the belief that we are all spiritual beings having an earth experience. Mm. Okay? So we don't have anybody working at Inner Fire who sees the human being in a more reductionist, materialistic view as made out of genes and hereditary forces and DNA and all of that, you know. We all see the human being as a creator and not a victim. But we all have felt a victim at times. But that's not who we are, you know. And so for me, I could say my taproot stems from what's known as anthroposophia, you know, or people might have heard of Rudolf Steiner and his work in the education system. Actually, that's where I first met it, was looking for a form of education I had not had, realizing I really wanted to be a teacher because I couldn't imagine a more important role in life. But I worked in many alternative schools and didn't find it, kept looking until I came across a Waldorf school and was struck by an element of truth. I thought, I don't know what it is, but this is it. Mm-hmm. And so I then began to study and learn from the work of Rudolf Steiner, and I must say it really spoke deeply to what was already in me. It's funny, it's like it wasn't that, I mean, sure, in some details I learned new things, but in essence it spoke to what was longing to be expressed in myself. You know, and so over many years of teaching in Waldorf schools and then working in anthroposophical inspired clinics where we never used medications the way we do, and that was mostly in Europe, the way it's done in the United States. And so I was able to put into practice and observe a lot of what I had, you could say, theoretically learned. But then the whole point to me is, how do we manifest it? Mm-hmm. How do we work with it? So all my years, over 35 years of working with artistic therapy, different mediums, you know, you tap into, you find that clay is a medium which can really help a person come into themselves, dare to enter back in to the physical body in a way that in a safe way. Mm-hmm. You know, so at Inner Fire we have various different, I would say, anthroposophically inspired therapies, but then it depends so much on the individual therapist. We also have yoga, which is not particularly anthroposophically inspired, but we have other therapies as well. But we're always focusing on the individual healing themselves by staying engaged in the program at Inner Fire. So we've had, going back to your initial question, we've had seders, we've had Muslim presentations, we've had all sorts of different, whatever speaks to somebody, whatever somebody brings, they can offer and share it if they would like. You know, we celebrate Christmas, but, you know, it could just as easily be experienced as the light in the darkness. Mm. You know, so there are many ways to interpret it, but we don't, you know, people typically in their, you know, toward the end of their time at Inner Fire, if they want to go to a church or they want to go to a synagogue or something, we can arrange that. But initially, there is so much going on within Inner Fire that and many of them are not ready to go out into the public. Mm-hmm. You know, so we don't tend to go out to churches or so, but totally honor where they are. And in a way, what I've loved to hear is many of the seekers will speak about how you can talk about anything at Inner Fire. and you really can.
Mm-hmm.
But we're very interested in learning from each other, and people who have not expressed things in the past are able to talk and share their questions. And in fact, we have one evening of the week, we have sharing a question, where we sit in a circle and anyone who has a question they've been living with can give the background to it and then shape it into a question, present the question, which means they're interested in listening. And then you go around the circle, and anybody who has anything they want to add or offer in response to this question is able to. And then we go back to the original person and has anything been helpful? And they say, yes, I really appreciate what so-and-so said. Or they may say, well, not particularly, but I am glad I asked it. Whatever. It's just a chance. Share your questions. Life is so busy.
Yes.
That these real profound questions we never have time for.
Well put. And from my point of view, it's the connection, the authentic connection between people that is oftentimes one of the most impactful in terms of a healing element in any kind of a program.
Yeah.
So to bring forth a person's authenticity through the arts, through music and singing, I know that's part of your program, but through the arts, through movement, through connecting with nature, and through connecting with each other and the guides and the seekers together, exploring certain questions is absolutely wonderful. And I think it's one of the things that makes your program so unique, really, is it's drawing forth the deep existential questions, or the deeper questions of the heart, if we can say that, and the heart and the soul, and helping people to form their own answers. But let me ask you, as part of your exploration of anthroposophy and especially the clinics, I know there's one in Holland that is anthroposophically oriented. Can you say something about the kind of results that they've had?
Sure. Yeah. I was. It took me 33 years to get to a place in Zeiss called Arta, and it's like, never give up. You'll get there one day when the time is right. And indeed, it was, because since then the government has withdrawn funding, and I think they've pretty much had to close, which is a huge shame. But at Arta, it was a drug and alcohol rehab. And that's a bit different from Inner Fire, because basically we're helping people come off their psychotropic medications. Yeah, we're not typically, at this point now, we're not typically a drug or alcohol rehab. But there they had a 65 to 70% recovery rate.
Oh, that's fantastic.
In Holland. Now, the rest of Holland had like 10 to 15. I think in the United States we have maybe 2 to 3.
Yeah, it depends on who you listen to, but it is very low, especially if you look over the long term, not just while a person's in treatment. Yeah.
And I went to Arta and spent quite a while there, just as Inner Fire was brewing within me, and it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. And there's this saying, out of form comes freedom. And I would say Arta is like our sister organization. In a way, we're a child of Arta, or however you want to say it, or maybe a sister, in that we also vary in many ways. But a key thing is everybody at Inner Fire, and this is also what they had at Arta, everything that happens is for a particular reason. So you can question anything we do at Inner Fire. Nothing is done to be nice. Nothing is done to use time. But there's a therapeutic aspect to it all. And there's also, we get up and and you're down at the main house for breakfast at 6:45. And take whatever medications you may be on that you're in the process of tapering from. We have breakfast. We go for our morning walk by 8. We then have this day, and everyone knows if you're in the garden or in the kitchen or in the forest or cleaning that morning. And then, so the beauty is, in the morning, you do community work. So you serve others in the community. We have a healing herbs garden, and one day I hope we'll have a little cottage industry where the seekers learn how to make the ointments and we sell them too. But so you could say in the morning it's more the out breath. I work for the community. In the afternoon I work on myself through the different therapies or the counseling work or so. And so yeah, Arta, but one of your questions was, well, have I been inspired by any other organizations? And in fact, Emma, it's really awful to say this, but I am not aware of there being another organization like Inner Fire. Mm. I mean, parents have told me they've searched all over the country for something like this and haven't found it. Many people say, well, if Inner Fire doesn't work, nothing will work for my child. Mm. And I get emails from different parts of the world saying even knowing Inner Fire exists gives us hope.
Yes.
But to me, it's outrageous that there are so few options in this realm. And I'm hoping, sometimes I've thought, well, gosh, Inner Fire at the most will only have 12 people a year. And it's a drop in the bucket compared to what's needed. But I did comfort myself once because I, for instance, have used homeopathy all my life. And my son has had nothing but homeopathy, my children, so. And so I thought, well, we're a drop in the bucket, but we're potentized,
Well, another thing about it, Beatrice, is that you may be a model. So there has to be someone who's like breaking the ice and then opening up a whole other way of doing things. And it could be that Inner Fire is just that. And I want to add something to your comments, which is when I visited you, I was so impressed by a story that you told about a person who is the founder of an organization helping people in a very structured and responsible way to withdraw from psych meds. And if I remember correctly, one of the things he said about your program is that you have the heart and soul, you attend to the heart and soul in ways that their program doesn't reach. Yeah. And that impressed me very much because there are very few places that that are structured in a way to responsibly supervise withdrawal from psych meds when that's what the seeker or the patient wants. And I know that you are willing to do that, but you're not necessarily making people do that or convincing them they should or in any way pushing that. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that there are some people who are with you that are withdrawing and they're under doctor's supervision as they're withdrawing. And if we might shift a little bit, you've answered so beautifully the kind of philosophical origins that you've dipped into and that you have brought with you into creating Inner Fire, which is quite unique in the world. But one of the things that I know some people will be wondering is, well, what about the medical orientation? Does Inner Fire completely, throw that overboard, or are there psychiatrists that you have access to, or do nurses come in, and so that there are medically trained people who are part of your program?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that because it's good to be clear. We have a psychiatrist who I must say I'm full of admiration for him because he has gone out on a limb to do this. Many psychiatrists, actually many, more and more are realizing the meds are not the answer at all. And so there's a real shift. And it takes courage for them to do this. So I'm very, very grateful for him. And I drive the seekers at least monthly to visit with him, and he will sit with them and he will listen to them and discuss with them the tapering process. Mm. And sometimes an enthusiastic and naive seeker will say, I just want to cold turkey and get off it all. And it's like both he and I will say, no way. because you want to recover, and it takes time for our bodies to reassemble, you know,
Yes.
and slowly, carefully. And that's why typically, Emma, it's ideally a year program,
Mm-hmm.
and there are always exceptions.
Mm.
You know, we had one wonderful young man who came to us whose baby was going to be born in July, and he wanted to be off his meds before then. So he and his wife came and interviewed with us, and we could see he was committed, and I was quite impressed by this little baby who was already having such an influence on her dad, you know. And so he would come in every day in his tapering process and say, this is hell. This is awful. This is so hard, but I'm going to do it.
Mm.
And that's music to my ears, you know, and to stay engaged. And he did. While he was feeling awful,
Mm-hmm.
still go and work in the garden or cook in the kitchen or do this, so that the withdrawal symptoms had to be shared with the practical work at hand. And that's key. So we also have an RN who comes in and checks on the vitals on the seekers and their tapering process and so on. We also have a homeopathic anthroposophical doctor who comes in, and she also is aware of the Bach flower remedies and so on. So she will meet with each individual, has an hour with them also. So so there is that aspect of it, for sure.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your going into that in more depth, because I think the best programs are all about balancing the very best that we have. And of course, Western medicine has a lot to offer, but it's not one size fits all.
Exactly.
You can't just apply that to everybody.
Yeah.
And the program that you have is drawing on some of the best that's available to us throughout the world. And I just want to celebrate what you've put together, Beatrice. Really, it's not just because you're unique, and not just because you're a Vermonter like I am, but really the program has been envisioned, I think, and there's so much of soul and spirit that infuses the program, which is a tribute to you and the rest of the guides. But what you're bringing forth is something that the ancient rishis, the wise people of India and of many other countries, have said is paramount to the ultimate health, which is that a person connects with their soul and lives from the soul, and that ideally communities also connect with the soul and encourage people living from the soul. So I think what we'll do is end there, and I could talk to you for hours and days, but at this point I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your willingness to go more deeply into this and put something out so that the public knows more about your program.
Thank you for the opportunity, Emma.
You're very welcome. Is there anything that final words that you might have? I don't want to cut you short.
Yeah. I would just say I feel a huge gratitude for all the people who I've worked with. Some people from the Department of Mental Health in Vermont, from also others from the more traditional realms, and I am so impressed that they can wear one hat, but their heart responds to this. And they, as one person said, inner fire is shifting the paradigm. Someone working for the Department of Mental Health. And I said, well, yes, people are dying. That's why. And just that they are willing in these times to go beyond the box, to see beyond the box. And we've got to bring change and choice. So I just feel so grateful, and we're never really alone. That's my experience too.
Yes. There is collaboration happening, although it might not be formalized.
Exactly.
But in some ways, we could say the wind is at your back, at least for people who are really opting for change that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you so much. And
Thanks,
I look forward to further talks with
That's
you.
great.
Okay.
Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.